Hey folks, it's Nate. Thanks for joining me at the art table again today. I want to talk a little bit about a subject that has been getting some discussion around YouTube again, and why I think it's important from the viewpoint of an author or creator. That subject is so-called React content. Now, so-called React Andes are an interesting topic, and before I talk about why I think it's important for creators to think about, and especially for writers to think about, we need to talk a little bit about what it is and what it means and why it's difficult to deal with. And the main reason it's difficult to deal with is because it involves copyright infringement. I've talked about copyright infringement a couple of times already in the past few months, talking about the difficulties that anime tubers are having with Japanese anime companies who operate under a very different set of copyright laws that make very few provisions for free use, assuming they make any provisions at all. I don't think they actually do, but I'm not an expert or even knowledgeable very much about Japanese copyright law. And I discussed copyright again when I was talking about why I have lost some faith in television as a good storytelling medium, at least in the people who are creating the television we watch today. Now, as a brief reminder, I am not an expert on copyright law. I haven't been to law school, but I did study a little bit of copyright law, especially as it relates to writing, when I was in college, because I was studying writing and professional communication, communication in a business setting when I was in college. And that is part of business communication, understanding copyright law and what is or is not copyrighted. The problem with copyright law is it is very subjective, and it is more subjective the more artistic the kind of expression you are dealing with. It is very easy to tell when a copyright has been infringed by a person, say, copying an entire book, giving it a new name, and selling it with themselves as the author. It's a lot more difficult to assess when you are dealing with someone ripping off the formula of a TV show and repackaging it and marketing it in the same broadcasting audience. It's also more difficult to assess when you look at transformative use of a work. Probably the best known transformative artist in the modern era is Weird Al Yankovic. He takes a piece of music that is very popular and gets a lot of radio play. He takes out the lyrics that the songwriter wrote and he replaces them with lyrics that spoof the original lyrics and are usually pretty funny to listen to. The United States Supreme Court has determined that when you do something like this, you are not infringing copyright. Rather, you are taking something and you are using it as fodder to transform the original work of art into a new work of art, which you then hold the copyright for. A less than perfect analogy for the way this works is saying that a lumberyard has no claim on a chest of drawers just because the lumber the chest of drawers was built out of came from that lumberyard. However, React content is not a parody. React content is a response to the original content that includes the original copyrighted work or parts of the original copyrighted work to give context to what the responder, the reactor, if you will, is reacting to or responding to. React content may be the most subjective version of fair use there is. In order to qualify as fair use or transformative use of a copyrighted work, there must be a certain amount of original content that relates back to the copyrighted work in clear and obvious ways. For example, I cannot sit in front of a camera, play the flute for 30 seconds, and then run an entire episode of Avatar: The Last Airbender afterwards and call it React content. I also could not take an episode of The X-Files and periodically break into the episode, say where commercial breaks would have originally fallen, and play the violin for 30 seconds and have that be a transformative work of content. On the other hand, if I were to play an episode of Stargate SG-1 in, say, 2-minute increments, and then spend 3 or 4 or maybe even 5 minutes talking about the camera work, the writing techniques, the character's dialogue, and how it works or doesn't work, that would be transformative content because I am responding directly to what is occurring in the TV show and I am giving my own thoughts and opinions on it. Alternatively, I could make jokes or do something like a riff tracks, where I make fun of the bizarreness of a setup in Stargate SG-1, because a lot of them are pretty strange. That is transformative content that qualifies as fair use under United States copyright law. And let me emphasize, we are talking in terms of United States copyright law. I can't speak to any other nation's copyright law. And in theory, although not in practice, let's be honest, U.S. copyright law is what applies to YouTube and Twitch, which is where most reaction content lives. So the first difficulty in dealing with reaction content is determining whether the reactandee is using this content in a way that is covered by fair use or not. And there is no one-size-fits-all way to assess that. There's no saying a certain percentage of the content has to be original and belong to the person doing the reacting. A 40-minute video essay before a complete rerun of a, say, 25-minute episode of G.I. Joe doesn't count as fair use. You are essentially giving an entire essay on a TV show and then rebroadcasting that TV show. You'd be better off just recording the video essay. Likewise, you cannot just say run 60 seconds of the copyrighted content and then react to it. That works fine for a long TV show, but if you're reacting to a piece of music that's, only 2 or 3 minutes long, well, you've just run a third of it with no reaction whatsoever, with no commentary whatsoever. And you're starting to strain the limits of what counts as transformative in that case. So just as it's impossible to have a one-size-fits-all definition of what is and is not copyright infringement in React content, it is very difficult to say whether React content is good or bad. In general, I think if it falls under fair use, React content is very positive. It's good for the person who makes it, and it's usually good for the person who is being reacted to, unless it is a really brutal, bare knuckles, no holds barred critique of a piece of art, in which case it may not be good for the person who is being reacted to, but that kind of React content exists, sure, but it's not the most common by a long shot. However, this discussion on YouTube, at least, has been sparked by the habit of some Twitch streamers to take YouTube videos and play them in their entirety without saying anything at all, or while they get up and leave and go do something else. Now, many aspects of React content are very nuanced and very complicated and very difficult to parse. This is not. This is entirely negative. I know that Twitch streamers have a lot of reasons they claim this is not the case. I am not interested in addressing any of these arguments in this video. A lot of people have already shown why these aren't the greatest arguments, although some of them do kind of have some merit to them, talking about exposure and things like that. But I feel these things pale in the face of the reality of the legal situation you create. Because you see, when you run copyrighted material that belongs to someone else, and you are not protected under some fair use clause of U.S. copyright law, you steal that content. And I don't just mean that you steal the views it would have gotten or the ad revenue it might have generated. You are claiming ownership of that copyrighted material. You are saying, I am the one who makes decisions about this piece of intellectual property. I am the one entitled to rewards for creating this intellectual property. Now, I know that many of the people who are in the habit of running YouTube videos as filler on their live streams while they do something else don't intend to do that. But the reality is, under U.S. copyright law, you are making that assertion. And if the person whose copyrighted material you are using does not dispute your use of their material, then under the law, they are ceding all of those rights to you. They are essentially giving you the copyright to their material. Now, there is an attitude among creators, just as much as in the rest of life, to say, hey, let's go along, let's get along, let's not rock the boat, let's not make a big deal about this. But the reality is, when your content is used without your permission and without the use of a fair use shelter, the person whose content is used has to fight back or give up some of their rights. And that is really deeply disturbing to me. Yes, maybe copyright law would be better if there was some kind of provision to allow you not to enforce your copyrights in certain cases. Although I'm sure such a use of copyright law would quickly be found discriminatory and removed under some other aspect of US law. And yeah, it would probably be better if there was some level of copyright reporting on YouTube and Twitch that was less aggressive than, say, a DMCA filing. It would be really nice if Twitch streamers would come to an agreement with YouTubers or other artists before they use their content on a stream. But until such things exist, I don't think that video creators or writers or musicians or voice actors or whatever other genre of creator you want to cite has the luxury of not using those copyright tools to enforce their intellectual property rights. I know that streaming is a real grind, but it's a grind you agreed to. I never agreed to give you my intellectual property rights. And until something changes, I intend to defend those property rights, and I would like to see other people do so as well. Until it becomes clear that this situation is untenable, I don't see anything about it changing. And that means that a lot of creators are going to get a lot of their stuff stolen. Yes, stolen. And I don't think that's right. Anyway, that's all I've got for you today, guys. There's a like button and a subscribe button down below. You can use those as you see fit, and I will talk to you later.